Hello, this is Edward Funk, and podcast 73. Title is Hollywood Goes to War and Loretta Young Part. But before we get into that battle, if you've been following these podcasts, uh, Loretta often had battles with the studio heads, the studios that she was working with. And so before we get to World War II, we're going to get to her battle with Harry Cohn, head of Columbia. Okay, Loretta explained. We started production on Bedtime Story and discovered we needed an extra dress for the next week. I had recently shopped for my personal wardrobe at I. Magnon's, and I said, I have a beautiful dress that I haven't worn, and I'll sell it to you for the picture. The people at Wardrobe agreed, and I called I. Magnon to send the white dress to Columbia. The wardrobe man asked, what's it going to cost? I asked him, well, what'd you pay Irene? She's a designer, for the other evening dress that Loretta wore in the picture. He said $750. So I said, fine, same price. Now, a few days later, my agent called me. He said, Harry Cohn, the head of Columbia, is madder than hell. He said that you're charging him $750 for a dress you paid $163 for, and he thinks it's disgraceful that you would try to make money on him that way. Okay, the sales price was still on the dress, and a lady from the wardrobe apartment alerted Harry. I got furious. It's none of his business what I paid for it. I explained that it was a sale dress from Bernard Newman, and because he's a friend of mine, he spent hours adding a scarf and redesigning the dress, for which I paid extra. He called me back in a few minutes and said, we just talked to Harry, and he says, no way is he going to pay you $750. He won't buy the dress. He's sending it back to your house, and he'll have wardrobe department copy it. Quoting Loretta, this started us off, us being herself and Harry Cohn. Overtime at the studio, very expensive, and I knew it. So I decided I would not fit during my noon hour, but only after I finished working at 6. That put all of them, the beaters, the seamstresses, everyone, on overtime. We'd be in the fitting room, and I'd say, oh, this beading is lovely, but it should be down there, don't you think? So they'd have to take it all off and put it all back on again. I don't know how much money I ran up on that dress. Harry Cohn was furious with me and sent word, tell her she's not to take her stockings home anymore. Now, for years at the studio, when I put on a pair of stockings, I just wear them home. I'd never bought a pair of stockings, hold on, in my life, and no one seemed to mind. A star's not going to wonder who wore these stockings before. Now the studio didn't supply your underwear, but anything you could see was supplied, and stockings are something that you'd see. So I said, oh, okay. So each night as I would take my stockings off, I'd put my fingernails all the way through them and just put in a rip. Then I'd put them in a cellophane bag and send them up to Harry's office marked Loretta. Now that Congress has declared war, Hollywood responded in a major ways. Both the Hal Roach Studios and the Disney Studios were commandeered for the making of training films. Bette Davis and John Garfield organized the Hollywood Canteen, where servicemen were entertained by the stars. Loretta remembered observing Bette Davis at this time. Oh, she was bright, extremely so. And she had very little self-consciousness. She didn't much from herself as far as looks. She never thought she was pretty. Therefore, when she talked about something she was interested in, she learned everything she could about her subject, no matter what it was. She did so well, she scared the hell out of me. You didn't dare open your mouth or she'd pin you right to the wall. I think we can all kind of imagine the Bette Davis of the films doing this kind of thing. Okay. Tom Lewis, Loretta's husband, received a direct commission as a major to head the Armed Forces radio section. The idea was to provide radio entertainment for all of our troops, regardless of where they were stationed. Programming consisted of telecasts produced for the U.S. commercial stations, minus the commercials, as well as specially produced material. The programs were transcribed on long plain acetate discs that could be shipped all over the world. Major Carter Herman, Polly Ann's husband, reported to Tom. He was an officer in charge of the short-wave operations section. Short-waving was used for special events like the World Series. Armed Forces Radio was an ambitious undertaking, and it was just the opportunity that would tap Tom Lewis's, his husband's, best resources. He could charm, cajole, and posture his position of authority with ease, as he had been doing as a radio producer. Now, director Frank Capra was making films for the military, and after successfully convincing his superiors that he needed improved facilities, moved his division to the Fox Studios on Western Avenue in Hollywood. Tom's radio division relocated from Washington, D.C. to join Capra in that same studio. And by this time, Tom had been promoted to lieutenant colonel. Loretta was an excellent war bond salesman, credited with selling $7 million in bonds. She also visited induction centers as well as injured troops in the hospital. Loretta remembered signing a bomber that was headed for the Pacific. She wrote in large letters, Loretta, using a great big paintbrush. She recalled, I was up on a ladder, and it was some base back east. Not too long ago, I ran into a man who asked, do you remember signing a bomber? I was one on that crew. He told me he was the only one that survived. He had a picture of it, which he carried in his wallet. There they were, all standing in front of the giant of a plane, with my name larger than life written all over it. They were all smiling and pointing to my name. I was deeply moved and looking at that picture of all those young men. The USO asked Loretta to go overseas 2 or 3 times, but as Loretta recalled, Tom vetoed the idea, saying, no, absolutely not. That's why I am in the war, to protect my wife and family, and she's not going overseas. But no one else knew that. I was allowed to go down to the canteen from time to time, but Tom's attitude was no sense in everyone getting into it. His attitude was the war was his. Wartime audiences could not get enough of Hollywood entertainment. To accommodate the war workers' and servicemen's demand, many theaters operated 24 hours. Because they're working in these factories making bombers and planes and everything else, and so their discretionary time could be any time, that 24-hour period. Now, my sister Eileen, set in Greenwich Village, had done very well. Hollywood, never adverse to imitation, placed Loretta's next film, A Night to Remember, in Greenwich Village. It was billed as a comedy thriller and co-starred Brian Aherne. Loretta had one of her favorite close-ups in that film. It appears very early, right after she steps out of a cab and is gazing at her new apartment building. Now, she really didn't like that movie, but if you read reviews of her movies today, that one gets some of the best reviews. She didn't appreciate how gifted she was in romantic comedy. She really thought to be an actress you needed some kind of serious role to bite into, but she was really good. And most of her films over time were romantic comedies. Okay, China, that's the name of the movie, was surefire excitement for wartime crowds. Loretta played an American teacher to a group of Chinese girls who was trying to escape from Japanese soldiers. The combined forces with Alan Ladd, who's an American patrolman salesman, and he switches his allegiance after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Now, get ready for the next podcast. That will be number 74. Alan Ladd becomes the very least of all of Loretta's leading men, and we'll go into great detail on why that's the case. So until 74 and the bashing of Alan Ladd, I'll see you then. Bye-bye.